great day to be together, one that is, heralded for its focus on love. And yes, obviously today, when you look at, the Western culture and what it is that we use this particular day to typically express, and I put that kindly, that's a nice way to say the socioeconomic machine of our culture has decided that this celebration is about romantic love. And I think romantic love has its brilliant place in the spectrum of love. But when we talk about the season of love here at Oneness New Thought, we're really talking about this pervading, ever-present, creative, expressing love, that agape love, that so many, all the other ineffable aspects of love. And so today, what a perfect day for us to be talking about our second principle of oneness and to expand on what we discussed last week, so that we can have a chance to, unpack it a little bit deeper and get a little bit further into it, and maybe take a look at how love specifically invites itself in to be a part of that dynamic. And so as we review that second principle now, it goes as follows. Humanity is God individualized. Because God is all there is, every human being is an individual expression of God. Endowed with self-awareness, humanity has the ability to recognize this connection and unlock its divine potential. While we are not the whole of God, God is the whole of what we are. And so last week, I talked a lot about this, the importance of us accepting and embracing the richness and the intensity of like that blessing, that our identity is absolutely unceasingly this living presence and embodiment of God, right? And so there is that thing that we are, and we distinguish that thing that we are from the stuff that we do, right? Now, there might seem to be a contradiction in there, but there's not. I know sometimes we say, if you say one thing, but then your actions don't back that up, it's like you're being two different people. And that's not what I'm saying. Because we did talk about the responsibility for all of us to really seek out and process that conscious remorse when we realize that we've done something that is in error, right? Something that we wish we wouldn't have done, said something we wish we wouldn't have said, treated somebody a way we wish we wouldn't have treated them, made a decision that we wish we wouldn't have made that way. And when we think about that, when we draw that in, there's a piece of that that connects us further to this principle. And so last week was all about how, every individual is an expression of God. And so we took a look at ourselves, like I am the divine. I am that creative power. I am unsoiled. I am whole. I am complete at all times, right? And so it's good for us in spiritual practice to lean into all of that and to feel the goodness that it gives us, right? Like that feels good to know that there is this ineffable force in the universe that no matter what we do or how far we stray from our own desires or from the virtues that we wish to uphold, it loves us, it cares for us, it cherishes us, and it has never seen us any differently than it ever would, right? So that's unchanged. That is universal forever. Excuse me. However, we also talked about how important it is for us to address when our behavior is out of alignment with our highest idea of what we think that is, right? The original, I've heard this several times, and I need to do some research on it to be sure, but my understanding is that the original text of the Bible, even the word sin at its root is really about missing the mark. And so whenever we are missing the mark, we have an idea in our mind. We want to live in oneness. We want peace and beauty and joy and truth and love and life and light. And we want all of that in our lives. And so we set out into the world to make decisions that way. And in the midst of making decisions that way, our emotions, our past traumas, our subconscious, all kinds of different stuff may come up. And who knows what might be in there to trip us up along the path of living up to those ideals that we love and cherish. And so when we take accountability for that, there's one really great way for us to infuse that with something outside of ourselves. So it would be really easy for us, if we were just using our own mind, to talk ourselves into believing that because we are whole and complete as humans, that there's no thing that we ever do that is a mistake. I think when folks use cliches that talk about mistakes, we are often just trying to address the discomfort of the mistake itself. And like so many other things, we come up with something that kind of is intended to skirt around the error so that we don't have to feel that sense of guilt or shame. And so last week we talked about, instead of going around and pretending like it's not there, using conscious remorse to acknowledge those errors. But there's another piece of this, because if we have decided that this is the truth of who and what we are, to the very core of our being, and because we recognize that God is all that there is, that means that I have to afford every single human being on this earth that same sense of divinity. Now, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I am challenged by this request of our faith, right? That willingness to see all of humanity, every single person in it, every aspect of it, to see all of that humanity in such a way that we first see its divinity, that we first assert its wholeness, that before anything else whatsoever, we have claimed the divinity of all humanity in everything that we think and feel about the people around us. And that's not easy all the time. It's just not easy all the time. But it's brilliant. But just like when we have that identity of ourselves that is perfectly divine, and then those decisions that we make that cause mistakes or errors or challenges in our life, and those things are trying to balance themselves out, right? When it comes to working with other folks, I gotta tell you, there is this conscious accountability piece. And for me, conscious accountability goes both ways, right? If you're unwilling to be held consciously accountable, then it's a real challenge for you to be someone who is holding other people consciously accountable. And when we take conscious accountability into account, what we start to figure out is that we are responsible to one another. You know, as Mother Teresa said, we belong to one another. And so I wouldn't necessarily say we belong to another, but I would say that the most tangible and direct expression of God that we can be caring for and acknowledging and recognizing in our lives, in real terms, is the rest of humanity. And if we recognize the divinity of humanity, then we have to invite a sense of that conscious accountability to humanity that is so important. And, you know, I was talking with someone this week, and I did a podcast that I'll be sharing with you guys soon once it gets published. I had a chance to chat with this magnificent colleague. Her name is Celeste, and she's out, and she used to be out in Oakland, California. And as we were chatting, we kind of had that conversation about accountability and how important it is for us to step into that awareness in a way that just is real and authentic. So when you make a mistake, Raise your hand. I'm going to be looking in the comments. Raise your hand if when you make a mistake, you are so stoked when someone holds you accountable to that mistake. Hold on, I'm going to try again. Raise your hand if you're just so stoked and happy when someone tries to hold you accountable to a mistake that you already know is a mistake that you've made. Well, usually I get all kinds of hands and stuff when I ask questions, and people commenting and going crazy. Of course not. Of course not. I don't know anybody. I've never met the person that is absolutely wakes up in the morning like, whoo, I can't wait for people to bring my mistakes up to me today. It's like, I just don't know that person, right? But here's what I know is that if we've laid this foundation of understanding with each other, that there is a love and a divinity that cannot be soiled, that is the reality and the truth of who we are. And we place faith in each other, that because I've known that I'm also knowing that of you. Because you've said yes to this idea of oneness and become a part of this community, you have said, you know what, I'm making that assertion about you too. I'm assuming that you are brilliant, divine, intelligent, lovely, that your intentions are always truly guided by love and the desire to be a greater expression of yourself. So if we really lay that foundation, which is what we're trying to do here at the beginning of the year, as we lay that foundation, all of that conscious accountability is actually happening as an additional layer, a cumulative layer on top of those relationships. And so what can happen is when we make a boo-boo, we get really sensitive. And then when someone goes, oh, hey, you made a boo-boo right here. And then we go, ah, right? Maybe that's because we've forgotten that we're not being attacked. And so intention and impact and those dynamics is something we're going to talk about a lot later in the year. But remembering that all of us have asserted that the intention is to treat each other as loving, living, brilliant expressions of the divine, period. Then conscious accountability becomes a service that we provide to one another. Not something that is a punishment, not something that is some kind of collective admonishment, not a shame and guilt machine so that everyone can come and tell us how terrible we are, but a relationship and a community of relationships where having those conversations are preceded by our divinity, and that seeing humanity in the same way is preceded by its divinity and our own. Because what happens when we get into a world where we want to be so affirming and so positive and so absolutely unceasingly supportive and nurturing to everyone that we undermine the concepts of consequence and accountability? Skipping over consequence and accountability for our decision making is an unjust way to address those who have been impacted by our decision making and by our actions. And so if what we're thinking forgiveness really looks like, and that acceptance of others really looks like, is an acceptance in which there are no consequences, or an acceptance in which there is no conscious accountability, then we've opened up ourselves to a spiritual bypassism that doesn't really serve anyone. Because A, it is patently unjust, and B, the only way for us to address our conscious remorse is by taking conscious accountability and responsibility for our actions, and then truly seeking to give some sense of restorative action to what it is that we've made a mistake about. And so that's a pretty tangled up web, but really what I'm trying to say here is very plain. Right? If we don't think that we have consequences to our actions, or we imagine that consequences to our actions cannot be negative, or we imagine that they're predestined or preordained, we have enslaved ourselves to a belief that will continue to demonstrate itself as being true in our lives. And so our relationship to everyone else will be a relationship that has that embedded in it. And I don't know about you guys, but I find it really, really hard to trust people who were never willing to be taken to account or held accountable. Anybody else have that experience of folks like those folks that just, they never apologize? They always say something nice and they always talk about how much they're sorry that you feel that way, right? But they never actually just flat out apologize. Well, first off, that's a two-way street. A, we don't ever want to be that human. If that's what we value, then we don't want to be that person. However, when others do that with us, we have to be willing to be accountable in that moment to be the ones that speak truth to those people in our spiritual community. Because when people are doing stuff because they really want you to feel better, sometimes they're saying that to make themselves feel better. And if we don't let them know that what they're doing is not making us feel better, then we're not really serving them, are we? That sense of authenticity is what binds us all. That authentic willingness to communicate our experience to each other in being held accountable and holding each other accountable, but also just simply in communicating the reality that we're experiencing without predicting the experience or impact of others, right? So if I tell you like, hey, you know, that I'm really glad that you shared that with me, but it doesn't really make me feel better about my circumstances. And I'm just not feeling great about this thing. And then we have a decision to make. Do we persist and try to talk them out of their experience and their feelings? Or do we acquiesce to the silence that simply reiterates to them that we love them, that we don't have an answer for them, and that we're willing to address our own internal discomfort about what being in their presence when they're going through that, and that our willingness to address that within ourselves in order to be present with and for them is the greatest gift that we can afford them in that moment. Have you ever had that person that just came and listened to you and then loved you and then walked away? No advice, no direction, no trying to lift up your spirits, right? And I'm challenged by this. It's hard for me to do that, right? And so I'm learning. I'm on a path of learning. But all of these concepts really revolve around our willingness to afford every other single human the thing that it is that we desire to be afforded. I mean, it's the golden rule. Treat others as you wish to be treated. Now, maybe I'm crazy. Right now, Tom is like, duh. But I would rather just know the truth. I'd rather know how you feel. I'd rather know how my presence in your life makes you feel. I'd rather feel like I have the ability to be honest with you. Because if that's the way that we are cultivating relationships in oneness, then we will actually know each other more fully, more completely, more wholly. And the only way we get there is if we lay this foundation of awareness. Everyone. And so if we're going to put our faith in anything here in the world, we have to begin practicing what does it mean for us to cultivate faith in each other? What does it mean for us to cultivate faith in humanity? Because when we cultivate faith in humanity itself, we absolutely, in every way, shape, and form, show up in the world as that perfect, whole, and divine being that we are. And that's who we all want to be. That's who we all want to meet. That's who I want to meet. I want to meet the version of you that feels most authentic about itself, most secure in its identity. I want to be part of the community that you travel with, that helps you and that is helped by you in order to achieve figuring out more about ourselves, finding out who we are, where we're making mistakes, where we're succeeding, how we're growing, being able to look back and see like, oh, remember when together. That's what recognizing the unity of humanity is really about, is getting into that with such deep conviction that even when people's decision-making has a negative impact on us, we can find ourselves not damning them and dehumanizing them, but instead seeking just, conscious accountability for their actions without being confused about the divinity of who they are. And that really is the bottom line, folks. You know, if we're going to go around and plant seeds in our consciousness that everybody's terrible and everything is scary, then that's the life we're going to lead, and that's how we're going to experience humanity. And so we have to begin consciously planting seeds that tell us, even in spite of all of the terror that has been broadcast across the internet and the airwaves, that at its root, it is true that humanity itself is an individualized expression of God, which means that it is brilliant, that under the surface of its error decision-making, there is something so vibrant and so creative and so powerful that literally more people wake up every single day than people who have been violated by other members of humanity. That's just a natural fact, right? So let us fall into that state this week of being really conscious of where we're defensive when we could be curious. Let us receive the gifts that we get from other people, whether they're from people that we love or people that we don't love so much. And let us be curious about what others are seeing and ask ourselves where it is that we might need to seek some conscious accountability within ourselves so that we can begin to unfold the growth within us that lay in wait from that experience and from the gift that that person's perspective has afforded us. Because absolutely, to the core of my being, I know that every single living human being is absolutely an expression, an individualized piece of the thing that I call God. And so I have to place faith in it and seek every single day to try and treat all of humanity as if it were my God. I have to treat my planet as if it were my God. I have to treat my thoughts and my feelings as if they are God. Because in oneness, it is all God. And that includes you and everyone else. Please join me in this affirmative prayer. Because what I know is that the oneness and the wholeness of all of humanity is even bigger than just humanity itself. Humanity is simply one expression of the divine that has expressed all of creation everywhere. And in doing so, it has brought about and given rise to life itself. And in those living things, it has given rise to self-awareness, which we have, and we claim it now. And so being self-aware means that we are aware of our individuality, but that we are also God aware of itself as the one. And so because we claim that now, we recognize it not only in ourselves, oh yeah, we claim all of it in ourselves, all of that awareness that our divinity and goodness is preserved always, and that is what precedes every action that I take in my life, but also that every other single human being that I come across is also a divine expression in that very same way. Even that one. Yep, even that one. Whatever one you're thinking of, all of them, every one of them. I know right now that every single human being is born with a divinity that is immutable and irrevocable. And so rather than get into the dizzying experience of judging whether or not someone has a right to be considered a divine human, that case is settled now in my mind. Every human is seen as fully human, and in that full sense of humanity, every living being receives my love right now. And yeah, sometimes my love looks like hugs and snuggles and kisses, and sometimes my love looks like cheers and jeers, and sometimes my love looks like conscious accountability, and sometimes my love looks like silent presence, but always my love is brought forward in my life, because through love, more good is always assuredly achieved. And so because I know that, I give thanks. I give thanks for this community that allows me to live with these principles and practice them and toss them around and play with them and find out whatever I might find out in my life by applying them. I'm grateful for the fact that I am present to this awareness so that I can move into the world and keep planting those seeds of inherent divinity and a knowledge and belief and a faith in that divinity in myself and in others every single place that I go. I'm grateful to be able to articulate these ideas when they make sense and when they don't make sense, when they seem to inspire me and when it seems like my brain's just mulling them over. The powerful and intense ones and the dull and kind of blasé ones, like all of them. I give thanks for every inspired thought that I have and that I share and that I receive from my spiritual community. And so I just surrender it all. I give all of it into the arms of God. I surrender every aspect of what I know in this prayer to Allah that takes it and lifts it up, and with the love that I have given it, amplifies it with the love of all the cosmos and expresses it as my life right now, all around me, within me, bringing me nearer to that flawless victory of spiritual practice that I shall forever pursue. And so in this pursuit of that love that expands and expresses itself completely and wholly, I know that God walks with me, as me, through me, and for me, and in, through, as, and for all of humanity. This is the truth that I know now in the mind of God, and in my mind it is already done, and therefore it is already so. And so it is. Amen.